Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of the Understanding Your Adrenals webcast. My name is Winslow Dixon. I'm a holistic health practitioner, a published author, and founder of the Adrenal Alternatives Foundation. So I just want to welcome you to our second episode. Today, we will be discussing the very controversial topic of adrenal fatigue. And let me just first put out a disclaimer that I am not a doctor, nor do I claim to be. And so this information is from a patient's perspective that I have gathered through the years of having adrenal disease and working with different patients myself. So let's first define what adrenal fatigue is. Now, adrenal fatigue is different than adrenal insufficiency, and I just want to make that point very, very clear that adrenal insufficiency and adrenal fatigue are not interchangeable terms. Adrenal fatigue is defined as subpar adrenal function. This means that sometimes the adrenals produce too much, sometimes the adrenals produce too little, and it's an imbalance of a system. Adrenal insufficiency, on the other hand, is defined as adrenal failure. Adrenal insufficiency is where the adrenal glands do not produce the proper amounts of cortisol and aldosterone, which is replaced by fludrocortisone. So they require replacement steroid medications. There is no cure for adrenal insufficiency. So I wanted to make this video just because adrenal fatigue is not recognized as a diagnosis by the Endocrine Society. And if you want to see people lose their minds, mention adrenal fatigue and an adrenal insufficiency Facebook board. And there's this ugly dichotomy between the two illnesses, and I have my theories as to why, but I wanted to do this video to kind of discuss both points. The reason that I believe that adrenal fatigue is such a touchy issue is because adrenal fatigue is mainly recognized by functional and holistic practitioners. Modern medicine really hasn't put a whole lot of faith and whatever into the diagnosis of adrenal fatigue. And so when you go to an endocrinologist and you say, okay, I'll be having these issues with adrenals and I'll be up and I'll be wired and tired, they'll look at you and, you know, if they do end up doing cortisol testing and things come back normal, they'll say, well, there's nothing wrong with your adrenals. And in modern medicine, there's this teaching that there is either an on or off switch with the adrenals. It's either full function or they don't have function at all, which is adrenal insufficiency. And just for argument's sake, that really doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that an organ or any body system can be all of a sudden perfect and then fail. You know, I know that that does happen, cardiac arrest and things like that, but with the adrenals, the concept of adrenal fatigue is that there is a gradient of function. Some people can have low function, some people can have too high of a function. Endocrine Society does not recognize that, but that is a syndrome recognized as fatigue. And like I said, modern endocrinology does not recognize that. There are many practitioners that are world renowned for treating adrenal fatigue, such as Dr. Michael Lamb, and his team is excellent. There's one locally here in Florida that I've mentioned, Dr. Joel Rosen. He's referred to as the adrenal recovery ninja. Really, the adrenal fatigue, there is no specific testing for it. There's saliva testing and, you know, also blood tests that you can get. But as far as adrenal fatigue, there is no definite test of, yes, I have adrenal fatigue, yes, you don't. It's really treatment of a myriad of symptoms that is defined as the adrenal fatigue syndrome. Like I said, modern endocrinology does not recognize it. And if you want to see people lose their minds, mention it in an adrenal insufficiency board, because people will fight tooth and nail that this syndrome doesn't exist, yet there are thousands of people that are treated for it around the world. So let's discuss the different treatments of adrenal fatigue and adrenal insufficiency. Adrenal insufficiency, like I said, is a diagnosable problem that is a cortisol deficiency. Your body does not make enough cortisol if you're diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency. There are lots of different types of adrenal insufficiency and lots of different causes, and we'll discuss that in next week's video to keep this one shorter. But diagnosed adrenal insufficiency does not have a cure. And the treatment for adrenal insufficiency is corticosteroids. So if you are diagnosed with adrenal insufficiency, you're then going to have to be put on a cortisol replacement, which is a steroid, which is either hydrocortisone, which is the most bioidentical, which is the most prescribed by endocrinologists, prednisone, which is a synthetic steroid, or dexamethasone, which is the longest acting steroid on the market. There are also other treatments that are alternative. I am on the cortisol pump, which is an infusion pump filled with cortisol instead of insulin, which creates a more circadian rhythm, which is natural. That's what I currently use, but that is the treatment for adrenal insufficiency. For adrenal fatigue, the treatments are very different. Most of the time, functional practitioners put patients on something called adrenal adaptogens. And these are chemicals and hormones and supplements that are made to help the body support the adrenals. Adrenal fatigue is not failure. Adrenal fatigue is typically diagnosed as subpar function. So you can have too much adrenaline or too much cortisol at some point and too little at other points. And so what these adaptogens do is they help your body deal with that stress, and they help your body regulate. There are supplements like Roselia Rose. There are supplements like ashwagandha. There are glandulars and different things that your functional practitioner can give you to help you do the adrenal fatigue, to help you get over it. There are also diet modifications, avoiding caffeine, sugar, anything that stresses your body out, lifestyle modifications, avoiding stress. Those kinds of things are the treatment for adrenal fatigue. Now, can those be advantageous in adrenal insufficiency as well? Absolutely. But the difference between really the adrenal fatigue and adrenal insufficiency is that adrenal fatigue has a point of, yes, it can be cured. Yes, it can be treated, more than the adrenal insufficiency, which is lifelong cortisol replacement, except in the case of secondary adrenal insufficiency caused by steroid suppression. But like I said, we'll get into that in the next video. So I just want to make this point because I feel like there's this ugly dichotomy between the adrenal fatigue people and the adrenal insufficiency people. And I think that's the case because adrenal insufficiency is kind of a red light, green light diagnoses. Either you have it or you don't. And I think the adrenal fatigue people get kind of jealous of that because they're looking at something and, you know, you go on Dr. Lamb's website and you're saying, oh, I have all this and this is happening. Yes, I do have adrenal fatigue, but there's no definite blood test for it. I mean, yes, you can have blood tests and cortisol testing and saliva and all that, but there's no definite test that says, yes, I have adrenal insufficiency. And so I think that's kind of the issue there. Also with, you know, the adrenal insufficient patients, you know, they might look at the adrenal fatigue people and think, oh, well, all they have to do is, you know, let their stress be a little better and they can be cured. And so I think there's a little bit of, I don't know, judgment or anger between the two because they're jealous of one another in two different aspects. But the point is that, you know, I'm not here to say whether something exists or whether it doesn't. That's your personal choice, and that's something between you and your physician. But I just want to make the point that adrenal insufficiency and adrenal fatigue are two different things. They have two different treatment options, and they both need to be addressed specifically. So I just want to recap on that. Like I said, this was episode 2 of Understanding Your Adrenals, and my name is Winslow E. Dixon. Next week, we'll be talking about the different problems and diseases that can happen when your adrenal glands fail. We'll be discussing Addison's disease, SAI, Sheehan syndrome, and Cushing's. So I hope you'll join us for that. And again, these were opinions and a patient's perspective on adrenal fatigue. Thank you.